So good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Leggett. I am the program manager here at the Central Florida International Trade Office, and I'm very pleased to have everybody join us today to learn about the benefits of international trade. For those who might not know already, the Central Florida International Trade Office, or CITO, is a local organization in Central Florida, funded primarily by Orange County and the City of Orlando to help businesses connect with the opportunities in the global marketplace. One of the ways we do that is through one-on-one counseling, and another one of the big ways that we help people to get involved in international trade is by hosting learning events such as this one. Many of you may have been previously to our workshops, but with COVID-19, we've had to pivot towards webinars, so hopefully this is working for everybody. Just in terms of a few administrative notes, other than the presenter and myself, everybody is on mute. If you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A bar, and we'll have some answers at the end. We'll be sharing a copy of this presentation afterwards, so you don't have to worry about rushing to take notes. And now I'd like to invite everybody to join me in welcoming Mr. Michael B. Cooney this morning. This is the Director of International Trade and Development at Enterprise Florida, and he has a whole presentation to talk about what he does there, so I won't go into that, but Mike has been involved in international and economic development his entire career. He has traveled to more than 50 countries and is a published travel author. And actually, one of the things I admire most about Mike is how he and his family took a year off to travel the world with their kids. That's a really amazing opportunity for the entire family, and especially the kids, to get to see how things work in the rest of the world. And that's, from my perspective, one of the best parts about international trade, is it gets you to look at your product differently and find new ways of selling them. And they've been able to do that with their entire lives. Mike lives in Orlando with his wife, Cottrell, and they have 3 grown sons, Morgan and twins, Zach and Harrison. So thank you, Mike, for sharing your experience and expertise with us today, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to address folks within the community and to tell them more about what we do as an organization. And you and your wife deserve credit as well, because as I recall, when you were with the government of Canada, you were stationed in Belgium, which certainly, at least for a time, gave your kids the opportunity to see other cultures and other locations in the world. So that, for my part, that's the most important thing you can do for your children, is to give them that exposure. I will go through my presentation in a very timely fashion, since I know we have about 30 minutes allocated for this. So some of you have probably heard this before, to the point of being able to give it yourself, but unfortunately you're stuck with me. So I do appreciate everyone taking the time. As Chris said, in addition to being the Director of International Trade and Development at Enterprise Florida, I'm located in Orlando, and I'm responsible for 10 counties in Central Florida, plus aviation, aerospace, and defense industries statewide. And I'll talk more about that in a moment, but let me begin. Enterprise Florida is the state's economic development organization. We have a number of responsibilities. The 2 primary responsibilities that most people are aware of are the interest in attracting companies to Florida from other states as well as around the world. That's handled by our business development team. And then I, along with quite a number of other colleagues around the state, help companies export more. And we do that in a variety of ways, including services and grants, as well as partnering with some of the finest people that I've ever worked with in Central Florida. And that, of course, would be Chris and his organization, our good friends at the SBDC in Orlando, Jill and Noreen, as well as the U.S. Commercial Service, namely working with Ken and Mindy, who some of you know. This is what we do. We, for the most part, our grants and services are for the small to medium company, that is size company. And if you follow the definition of the SBA, company is 500 employees or less, and I believe probably most would agree that's actually a very large company by most standards. Our sweet spot is anywhere from one person employee to upwards of maybe 150. It really just depends on the company. That isn't to say that companies can't get the grants that are larger, and of course under 500, and more specifically under 500 worldwide in terms of eligibility for our grant. We also, as I mentioned, partner not only with our local organizations that I just mentioned, but the economic development organizations from around the state. And not only do our business development colleagues work with them on a daily basis, trade and development works with them in terms of pushing out the information that they then can use specifically for companies in their communities. Our particular division is the foreign direct investment. So many times inquiries come in from around the world through our foreign offices, and we have someone on staff under international trade and development that works with those initial contacts. If they are a company that perhaps is going to be much larger than first expected, then they'll be turned over to the business development team. But we are more or less the first line of defense for initial contacts from abroad. These are the different ways that we communicate with our members, or I should say our clients, more specifically, since we're not a membership organization, but our clients. And those clients can be from a variety of industries, which I'll speak more about in a moment. As you can see, there's quite a number of activities that are ongoing. Some, as you can appreciate, have been curtailed, or as Chris mentioned earlier, we've had to pivot in several instances when it comes to our grants. So therein lies, again, the various things that we do as an organization. And some of these I'll talk more about in a moment in more detail. I do want to mention that if you're already not receiving our e-newsletter, you can sign up by going on the Enterprise Florida website or send me an email. You'll have my information at the end of the program, and just send me an email and I'll be happy to make sure that you're receiving that. The benefits of exporting are vast and numerous. I often say to clients, especially if they've never exported before, there is a very steep learning curve. And I'd rather just be honest with people than to suggest it's something you can simply do the day after deciding you want to export. It can be very, very complicated. At the same time, in this community and throughout the state, there's a lot of resources that can help you if you've never exported. If you have exported, there's a couple of different ways that can happen. I often refer to exporters by default. This is a company that produces something, whatever it may be, a product or service. Someone on the World Wide Web sees them and says, gee, send me 10 of those. They're now exporting, but that's not a strategy. Then you have the more experienced exporters that are out there day in and day out, seeking new markets, responding to their clients globally. Those people, in some cases, actually have people within the organization whose sole job is to deal with the exporting issues. That isn't often the case. Usually it's several people within, especially a small organization. So here are a number of the things that, of course, are benefits. Mitigating risk. Now more than ever, we see the challenges of having only one market source. I've worked with a number of companies. One in particular is a pyrotechnics company. All they've really dealt with are the big attractions locally. They've been very happy doing that for many years. I suspect now they're finding that maybe they should have worked on an international exporting strategy more than they have. Diversifying the customer base. We all know, again, that you can't, as the proverbial saying goes, put all of your eggs in one basket. So by having other clients, not just in the U.S., I remember I worked with a Scottish company once, and they said, in the U.S., the market is so big, many times companies don't even have to think about going outside the U.S. In their particular case, they told me they get up every day worrying about how to get outside of Scotland, because even in the EU, there's still limitations. Then, of course, you can find the others that are reasons why it's important to export. these are the major industries. With regard to the eligibility for companies to receive our grants, if a company is a manufacturer, and I'm not talking about assembly, I'm talking about manufacturing. They've taken a raw product and they send it out the door as a finished product. They're almost, I emphasize, almost guaranteed to get a grant. There are a few exceptions, but by and large, that's the group that we're really going after. In addition, if a company supports one or more of our other industry sectors, then they too, many times, are eligible to receive a grant. I'll use aviation and aerospace as an example. That is, as I mentioned, my responsibility statewide. There are a variety of companies, all with the express purpose of supporting aviation. They can be what is called an MRO, a maintenance, repair, and overhaul organization. They can be a part supplier. Talking and spoke yesterday with a carpet cleaning company, and that's all they do is work with commercial airlines. So it gives you an idea of the kind of diversity that is out there, and almost all of those companies would qualify for our grants. So again, companies that are manufacturers, and then companies that support one or more of the sectors that you see. Export ready and eligibility. So for us to work usually with an exporter, they do have to have some experience. If a company has never exported and is interested, then we would send them to Chris, we would send them to the SBDC, we would even send them to the U.S. Commercial Service just to get some of the basics of how to go about exporting. And then we would, of course, continue to assist them with just general information. Once they are export ready, then they would be eligible for our grants and services. We always recommend that companies have a good solid base in the U.S. and then look to other markets, because it takes quite a long time in some cases to develop new business in other markets for a whole host of reasons. There needs to be adequate capital for the long haul. It usually, according to our stats, takes in the neighborhood of 18 months in order to see the benefit from beginning a discussion to actually receiving an order. And many companies simply don't have that much money in the bank. So we make sure, especially as part of the criteria to receive an export marketing plan, that these companies do have sufficient cash, and that once the exporting starts rolling in, it usually is pretty self-sustaining. And then 100% management support. If management doesn't back this, there's no point in doing it. This is not a bottom-up approach, it's a top-down. So for that reason, these are the primary criteria that we use along with the SBDC when they're evaluating companies for the export marketing plan, which I'll speak about in a moment. And then you've already seen, and I've already spoken about the criteria. This is the most basic criteria. And the company, of course, I didn't mention earlier, needs to be a registered Florida company that can be found on sunbiz.org. Gold key in matchmaking. This is an example of pivoting. So as I like to tell my clients, whoever thought that we would be saying the good old days was 8 months ago, but that sadly is true. So as recently as 8 months ago, we were going what we called using the gold key, and that is something that we work with our partners at the U.S. Commercial Service. So if a company wanted to be in a new market and they wanted 3 to 5 pre-qualified meetings set up and ready to go before they arrived, we would put them in touch with the local U.S. Commercial Service representative responsible for that industry sector. They would send them a questionnaire, try to understand the markets they want to penetrate, understand the kind of clients they want to, the meetings they want to set up. Are they a perfect customer, a perfect distributor, perfect partner? And from that, it would then be shared, that questionnaire, with the office in the embassy of the location where the client wants the meetings to be held. That is the country. If it's decided that that embassy and the U.S. Commercial Service in the embassy can handle the request, then they will begin the process of digging deep into exactly what the client is requiring. That typically costs $950 to $1,200. it is one of our reimbursable grants, meaning you would upfront the money for whatever it cost. You would actually attend the meetings in that location, and then you would submit an export sales report and an invoice for the amount of the award. We now have, of course, as you might expect, a virtual version of that, and in doing so, we have engaged many, if not nearly all, of our 14 offices around the world. The U.S. Commercial Service has its own version, and we make it very clear that we don't really care which the client uses, whether it's the U.S. Commercial Service version or it's Enterprise Florida. It really doesn't matter. It's whatever works best for the client. So as an example, tomorrow, actually, we're having our very first webinar on Destination Europe, and we will have our office staff from the entire, I would say most of the EU, not entire EU, on the call, and there will be one person actually giving the majority of the presentation about Europe as a market. We recently brought Mexico on board, we brought Canada on board, South Africa, Tanzania, and Kenya. We just brought as well our offices in Taiwan, Japan, and soon to be Singapore that will also handle Hong Kong. So these all are an opportunity for clients to have 5 pre-qualified meetings set up and ready to go virtually. And this has become a very, very popular program, as you might expect, since our clients can no longer travel, at least for the time being. The VBM, the Virtual Business Matchmaking deliverables, are designed to connect Florida buyers with foreign buyers and sellers, of course. Again, we're targeting mostly the small to medium-sized companies. As mentioned, we have 14 offices around the world, and the 5 business meetings that are arranged are actually identified, a whole list of companies by our office, and then the client gets to choose which companies they would like these meetings to set up. They would like the office to set up the meeting with the company so that it'll maximize the benefit. We have had 2 of these so far, and we have quite a number of other companies that are in the pipeline ready. Target sector trade shows. This is something, again, that we have a trade show grant specifically for in-person shows. Since that's no longer the case, at least in the short term, we now have a virtual version, which I'll speak more about. But when the shows do come back in person, we have a grant to cover 75%, up to $7,500 toward the cost of the booth only. It does not cover the transportation, airlines, shipping, hotel rooms, etc. It's only toward the cost of the booth. Again, 75% up to $7,500. I myself am personally responsible for 4 major air shows around the world where I organize a Florida pavilion. We should have been at the Farnborough Air Show back in July. Sadly, it was canceled. The next big show is Paris, June of 2021. We're all hopeful that we will be there and things will be reasonably back to normal, followed by the Dubai Air Show, followed by the Singapore Air Show. In situations like that, I actually buy the raw space, have a stand builder who builds it to my spec, and then I sell the space back to Florida companies at cost. In addition to being in the Florida Pavilion, they also have a host of services that are made available to them as well. Then there's the virtual trade show programs. I had mentioned that we have a virtual, and I'll skip down to number 2, for transition purposes, but the virtual international trade show. So many of these shows have now gone virtual. For example, there's one today, which I'll be joining later. It is called Aero Engines. It was to have taken place in Norway. It went virtual, and it's a 2-day show that's now all online. Next week is MRO Asia Pacific. It was to have been in Singapore. It's virtual. And then there was one called MRO Americas that was going to be in the US, and then MRO Europe that was to be in Barcelona at the end of October. They have been now merged into MRO Transatlantic. And at this point, I have 2 companies in Aero Engines today and tomorrow, probably 5 companies that will be in a virtual booth come next week, and I'm hoping for about a dozen that will be at the MRO Americas. Then there's the virtual business matchmaking, which I've already covered. The Cost varies from location to location. The most expensive would be any of the virtual matchmaking that's done in Europe, and that's $2,500. Mexico is $1,000. Canada is $1,800, and then the others obviously vary as well. So that is another reimbursable grant. Much like the trade show grants that I mentioned, you upfront the money, and then you receive the money back after the actual event. And then there's the global website localization. We partner with a company out of the UK that produces 2 websites in 2 native languages of 2 new markets that a company wants to penetrate. This is highly beneficial, especially for companies with a lot of technical information. Again, using aviation. Aviation, fortunately, especially for me, uses English as the base language. But that only goes so far. After that, you tend to lose people pretty quickly if now you're going from conversational to technical. So many of our aviation companies and others throughout Florida have taken advantage of this. The cost is $12,000. Enterprise Florida covers $8,000. So the company receives 2 websites in 2 native languages of 2 new markets for $4,000 or $2,000 per website. And for anyone who's worked on websites, you know that is a deal that can't be beat. Then there's the export marketing plan. Again, this is something that we work closely with our friends at the SBDC. The cost for that is $5,000, and it essentially offers what is the equivalent of a business plan for an international strategy. It is an amazing document, and I cannot stress that enough. If you were to go out and pay for that through a private consulting, I have every reason to believe it could cost $30,000 or more. In this case, thanks to the amazing research capabilities of the SBDC, they are able to produce this document and deliver it. And again, the cost is $5,000. Enterprise Florida covers $4,500, and the company pays $500 to the SBDC. But as they say on TV, but wait, there's more, because for now, that $500 is even being waived, at least for the period of time, perhaps for another few weeks or a couple of months as a result of the pandemic. International registration grant. If a company requires a registration or certification to do business in another country, we have a grant that covers 50%, up to $10,000. A client of mine up in Umatilla required the CE mark in order to sell into the EU. That cost roughly $10,000. They received $5,000 as a refund. So that is a highly beneficial grant for those companies that, but for the certification or registration, they are not able to actually do business in that country. With regard to what companies can receive, we allow 4 grants between now and the end of June 2021, and you can mix and match them. So as you can see, that is the way companies can mix and match the grants. And of course, you'll receive this presentation so that you can look at it in more detail and study it. We also, through Enterprise Florida, offer certificate or free sale. Typically, this is used by food companies, processing companies, export companies, and they are the biggest users of this. It simply is a statement that they are legit and in business, which many companies require. And then we have these offices around the state. As I mentioned, I'm in Central Florida, so I will be your main contact. Here's my contact information, which you'll see more in just a moment, plus you'll receive this as part of the presentation. We, of course, are throughout social media. And I want to thank you for your participation. If there are any questions, feel free to present them in the Q&A. If not, you have my contact information, and you're welcome to contact me whenever, either by email or phone. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you, Mike. I think everybody who has listened to this presentation has gained a better understanding of what Enterprise Florida can offer their companies when they're looking to get started or continue on their journey in international trade. And now I'd like to invite people to pose questions. As I'm becoming more comfortable with WebEx, I if you want to just basically say you have a question in the Q&A or chat, I can unmute you and you can pose the question directly to Mike. I see Michael has asked whether the presentation will be published in YouTube, and the answer to that is yes. This will be put on the CFITO YouTube channel. Just to let you know what will happen after this in terms of follow-up, I will send to you either today or tomorrow an email message that includes the link to this presentation on the YouTube channel, a copy of the presentation that Michael has shared, as well as Mike's contact information, so that you can follow up with him and have a one-on-one conversation about what he can do for you on and helping your business. That's one of the things that they do really well, is just help take what you've heard today on a general level and talk about your specific situation and how Enterprise Florida can help you through their grants meet your goals.
Chris, if I may add, if there's any other questions, great, but I'll just add that some people want to know about what is the process for actually applying for a grant. So the way it works is that a company would commit to a show organizer for either a virtual booth or an in-person booth. Once they have paid, either in full or deposit, they contact me immediately. I send them a link to an online application. It's completed. It's very simple. Takes maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Has some very basic paperwork that's uploaded, including the invoice showing the company has paid a deposit or in full. Within about a week or two, they'll find out if they did receive the grant, if they didn't receive the grant, or if they need more information. Most of the time, companies do receive the grant unless there's something that we didn't know about going into it. Then, after the event occurs, as I mentioned previously, they will complete an export sales report, which is, again, a very simple document, include the invoice for the amount that they were awarded, and within about 2 weeks, we'll receive a check for that amount. So it's quite straightforward and probably one of the easiest grants anyone could ever apply for.
Yeah, that's one thing I hope people realize, is how fortunate they are in the state of Florida to get support like this. I think sometimes people might take for granted what is being done for them. But when I talk to people in other states, it's always with envy that they hear about some of the programs that Enterprise Florida offers to our businesses that manufacture here in Florida. Now I see there's a question from Michael Ortego, and he's asked whether these opportunities with trade shows can apply to other industries, such as the Dubai Boat Show, the European Fishing Tackle Trade Exhibition.
100%. So, in fact, Michael, I think you and I will be talking at some point within the next few days. So you either can say, I've heard it all and I have no interest in talking with you, which I completely understand, or we can get into more detail. The short answer is yes. And in fact, after we have our conversation, I will then introduce you to my colleague who is in Jacksonville. He handles the marine industry as I handle the aviation, aerospace, and defense. He puts together pavilions, somewhat like I do, but a little bit different in that he works with the show organizer and recruits companies to attend. So yes, and in fact, that was going to be one of the very first things I was going to mention to you, is that there is that support and that these trade show grants do apply.
Well, lots of positive comments for you, Mike. I don't want to get swell your head too much early this morning, but we're hearing from a lot of people how much they appreciate the information you shared in this presentation.
Glad to do it. We're always available. People, again, thank us profusely, and I always like to say, well, that's what we're here for. So I would also like to say that as a state organization, because we do receive our funding from the legislature each year, along with the incentive money that we have for the grants, that we are, in one respect, a very well-kept secret, not by intention, but there's a lot of companies that have never heard of us throughout Florida. And then there are those that have used our grants year after year after year. So that's what we encourage. That's what it's there for. Some people like to say, oh, it's free money. I like to change that thought process to say it's a rebate on the taxes you've already paid. So by all means, if you qualify, we ask you to take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I always suggest that any time you're speaking with your state representative or senator, it's really great to have them hear back from local businesses in their district that are using the Enterprise Florida services, that this is money very well spent. And you may know the return on investment off the top of your head, Mike, but I know it's many-fold what is invested by the state into Enterprise Florida.
Agreed, yes, and please don't hold me to this, but I will say that if I remember, it's somewhere about the neighborhood of for every $1 spent for Enterprise Florida, $4 returns to the state through export and other programs that we are involved with.
All right, well, I want to try and keep us to the half-hour length. I will give people one last chance for a question. I'll mention in the meantime that I hope people will join us again next week at the same time for a half-hour presentation on the on the District Export Council. I work at the NEC, but I'm talking about the DEC, the DEC. And that is an organization of businesses and service providers that get together to talk about how to improve export opportunities for the region. This is under the auspices of the Department of Commerce. We're all appointed. I'm the vice chair for trade policy on the DEC, the Central North Florida DEC. And we're all appointed by the Secretary of Commerce of the United States to help complement the work that's done by the Export Assistance Centers here and provide the perspectives of people who work all the time in international trade, whether that be through counseling or mentoring companies, sharing our experience, and just generally helping to promote exports as a way to grow your business. And the week after that, I would not want to fail to mention, both because Mike Cooney has very effectively spoken about how important these export marketing plans are that are offered by the Florida SBDC at UCF. And also because we have Noreen Alatar today on the line, who is going to be making one of the presentations on the 30th of September to talk about that. So we've got two more great short webinars lined up for you for the rest of the month. And seeing no other questions, I will thank Mike for joining us today and sharing with everyone all this information about Enterprise Florida and how they are here to help support your business to export fearlessly.
You're welcome, Chris. My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
All right. Everybody have a great day. Thanks.